nervous system. Music has existed in every human culture in history: tribal drums, ancient chants, modern electronic beats. But across all these styles, one thing appears again and again: groove. Groove is what makes rhythm feel alive. It's the difference between a mechanical metronome and a rhythm that feels human. And the secret behind groove isn't complexity, it's timing. Many people assume great musicians play perfectly on time, but that's actually not true. Great musicians often play slightly ahead or slightly behind the beat. This microscopic shift creates tension in the rhythm. Your brain detects this tension instantly, and when the beat resolves, your brain releases dopamine. That feeling is groove. Funk, jazz, hip-hop, and rock all rely heavily on this subtle timing trick. Now here's where it gets interesting. Researchers found that low frequencies trigger movement more than high frequencies. In other words, the bass is the real engine behind groove. Deep bass vibrations activate parts of the brain linked to motion. That's why bass-heavy genres like funk, hip-hop, and EDM feel so powerful. These styles rely on the relationship between bass and drums. Another secret behind groove is syncopation. This happens when rhythms emphasize unexpected beats. The musician shifts accents slightly off. This creates a rhythmic puzzle. Your brain tries to predict the beat, and when the groove locks in, it feels incredibly satisfying. The perfect groove sits right in the middle of simple and complex.
Thanks for dropping in.
This is why many musicians prefer live recordings. Machines can play perfect timing, but humans introduce micro variations. Tiny imperfections create life in the rhythm. A great drummer doesn't just play the beat, they shape the feel of the music. When the entire band locks into that feel, groove emerges. Brain scans reveal that the regions responsible for movement activate even if you're still. Your brain literally prepares your body to move. That's why concerts feel electric. Thousands of brains sensing to the same rhythm. So the next time a song makes you move instantly, remember what's really happening. It's not just rhythm, it's timing, bass frequencies, syncopation. Groove isn't just sound. Groove is biology. When rhythm connects to the brain, movement becomes inevitable.
Thanks for being here, Ajhel Squad.
Hey Strawberry, welcome to the stream. Good to see you here, Sidar Hazar.
Welcome Nining, glad you made it. Get it with you. Thanks for joining us.
Antenna bars increment MBRL.
Hey there, Gulpari, welcome.
The truth behind Linkin Park, fame,
Welcome in
pain,
T-Puck
and the voice
Good
no
to
one
have
could
you.
replace. Some voices don't just make music, they define how people feel. And for millions of people, that voice was
Thanks for
Chester
coming
Bennington.
in, Adrian.
But what most people don't realize is that the pain you hear in those songs wasn't performance.
Vidya,
it was
welcome.
real.
Make
And the
yourself
deeper
at
you
home.
look into the story of Linkin Park, the
Good
more
to
you
see you in
realize
the
this
chat,
wasn't just
Hannah.
music. It was something much heavier, because success usually follows a pattern. You build, die, you grow, you adapt. But this story doesn't follow that path. This is what happens when emotion becomes the foundation of everything. And once that happens, there's no separating the music from the person creating it. Before the world knew the name Linkin Park, there was frustration, confusion, a need to express something that didn't have a clear outlet. And when that energy finally found a sound, it didn't come out polished. It came out raw, heavy, honest. And that's what made it different, because it didn't feel manufactured. It felt like something people had been trying to say, but couldn't put into words. That's why it spread so fast. Not just because it sounded good, but because it felt understood. People didn't just listen to it, they related to it. They saw themselves in it. And when that happens, music stops being entertainment. It becomes identity. But that kind of connection comes with a cost, because when millions of people attach themselves to your voice, you don't just create anymore. You carry their emotions, their struggles, their expectations, and the more it grows, the heavier it becomes. And this is where things start to shift, because from the outside, everything looks like success, sold-out shows, global recognition, massive influence. But internally, that doesn't always match reality, because expressing pain and living with it are two completely different things. The more the music connected, the more it demanded honesty. And honesty at that level means constantly revisiting things most people try to escape. You're not just performing, you're reliving over and over again. Every show, every recording, every moment people expect that same emotion. And this is what people don't always see. Because when you become known for a certain feeling, you're expected to stay there, to keep producing it, to keep delivering it, even when it's coming from something deeper than people realize. At a certain point, it stops being about the music. It becomes about managing everything around it, the expectations, the pressure, the identity people have placed on you. And when that builds up over time, it doesn't just disappear, it accumulates. That's why the story of Linkin Park hits differently, because their music wasn't built on trends. It was built on something real, and real things don't fade the same way. They stay with people, they grow with people, they mean something long after the moment passes. But that's also what makes it complicated. Because the same thing that makes the music powerful is the same thing that can make it heavy. And when you carry that for too long, it changes you. Whether people see it or not, some artists create sound, some create connection, but the ones who turn emotion into music leave something behind that can never be replaced.
Hey Cola Bucko, welcome in. How's it going? Welcome WRCHN, good to have you. Thanks for being here, Par HEBRING.
T, welcome, thanks for joining.
Hey there, welcome to the stream. Welcome in my, thanks for tuning in.
Good to have you, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Why can the same beat play over and over again and somehow it still feels good? Same rhythm, same melody, same loop. But instead of getting bored, your brain gets locked in. That's not an accident. That's design. Think about your favorite song. There's probably a section that repeats again and again and again. And instead of skipping it, you wait for it. You anticipate it. You want it to come back. So why doesn't repetition kill the experience? Why does it make it stronger? The answer lies in how your brain processes patterns. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what comes next. It looks for structure, order, familiarity, and when it finds a pattern, it locks onto it. Music uses this system perfectly. Repetition creates prediction, prediction creates anticipation, and anticipation creates pleasure. When your brain correctly predicts what's coming next, it releases dopamine. That's why a repeated loop doesn't feel boring, it feels satisfying. Because your brain is winning the prediction game. Imagine hearing a beat for the first time. You don't fully understand it yet, but by the second or third loop, something clicks. Now you know where the kick lands, where the snare hits, where the rhythm resolves, and suddenly, you're inside the music. This is called loop locking. Once your brain understands the pattern, it syncs with it. And when that happens, you stop listening passively. You start feeling it actively. Your head moves. Your timing adjusts. Your body aligns with the rhythm. But here's the key: too much repetition becomes boring. The little repetition becomes confusing. The best music sits in the middle. It repeats enough to feel familiar, but changes just enough to stay interesting. This is where great producers stand out. They don't change the whole loop. They make tiny adjustments, a slightly different hi-hat, a small pause, a variation in velocity. You might not consciously notice it, but your brain does, and that small change resets your attention. You're listening to a track, the loop plays again, but this time, a sound drops out for a split second, then comes back. That tiny gap creates tension, and when the loop returns, it hits harder. That's not randomness, that's control. Repetition also creates a trance-like state. Your brain stops overthinking, stops analyzing, and starts flowing with the rhythm. This is why repetitive music is used in clubs, workouts, meditation, even ancient rituals.
Good to see you
because
here.
Repetition isn't just sound, it's a state. Now think about build-ups in music. The loop repeats over and over, building tension.
Welcome to the stream.
And then suddenly,
Enika,
the drop hits.
say hi.
That moment feels powerful because your brain has been locked into repetition beforehand. Without repetition, the drop wouldn't feel the same. This is the hidden formula. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity builds anticipation. Anticipation builds emotion. And emotion is what makes music stick. That's why simple loops often outperform complex compositions, because they're easier for the brain to grab and harder to
Good to
forget.
see you in the
So the
chat.
next time you hear a loop
SCBDA.
repeat, don't think of it as repetition, think of it as reinforcement. Each pass strengthens the connection between the music and your brain. That's why it doesn't get boring. That's why it feels addictive, because the more your brain understands the pattern, the more it wants to stay inside it. Repetition isn't lazy. Repetition is power.
TT.
Thanks for joining, CMSF.
There was a moment when one of the biggest metal bands in the world almost ended overnight. Not because of failure, not because of fame, because of one night that changed everything. They weren't beginners anymore, they weren't underground. They had built momentum, real momentum. The kind that doesn't just grow slowly but starts pulling everything with it. Fans, crowds, energy. Every show was louder. Every release hit harder. Every step forward felt
Hey
inevitable.
Lillis, welcome
They weren't
in.
just rising, they were becoming unstoppable. And then, in the middle of a tour, everything stopped. Dark roads, that cold air. A long stretch between cities. The kind of night that feels routine until it isn't. A sudden loss of control. A moment no one saw coming. And just like that, everything changed.
Good to see you. Touring
Silence replaced momentum. Shock replaced energy. Because someone wasn't there anymore. Not missing. Not gone temporarily. Gone. And that kind of loss doesn't just affect a band. It breaks identity. Because when you build something together, every piece matters. Every person shapes the sound. And suddenly, a piece was missing. Something fundamental. For a moment, everything stood still. Fans didn't know what would happen. The future was uncertain.
Welcome to the stream.
The momentum
Fri
they
10am
built
AEST.
felt like it might disappear with it. Because most bands don't recover from something like that. They fade, they fracture, they end, and honestly, that would have made sense. But instead,
Gee, glad you're
something
here.
else happened. They made a decision, deliberately. They chose to continue, not because it was easy, but because what they had built was bigger than one moment. Still, continuing didn't fix anything. It just meant they had to move forward with it. And that's where things changed. The sound shifted. Noticeably, there was more weight in it. More emotion, more intensity. Because now, every note carried something else, meaning. And the audience felt it. The connection grew stronger. Because people don't just connect to perfection, they connect to truth. They didn't hide it. They carried it forward into the music. And over time, it transformed them.
Thanks
The
for
shows
dropping
became
in,
bigger. The
TBLS
sound
Mutt.
became heavier. The impact became global. It wasn't despite what happened, it was shaped by it.
Sammy
Because when
says,
something hits that
message.
hard, you either collapse or you evolve. And they evolved. Most people think success is a straight line. But real growth doesn't work like that. It gets interrupted, broken, tested. Those moments decide. Everything.
Hey, mommy,
Skill gets you
grab a
noticed.
seat.
But resilience is what keeps you going. Anyone can build momentum when things are going right. But what you do when everything stops, that's what defines you. You can quit, reset, or rebuild stronger. Rebuilding isn't about going back. It's about adapting, evolving. The people who last aren't the ones who avoid setbacks. They're the ones who turn them into fuel. One moment could have ended everything. But instead, it created something even bigger than before.
You can keep the same drums, same melody, same tempo, and still completely change how a song feels, just by changing the bass. That is how powerful groove really is. Most people listen to music from the top down, vocals, melody, hooks,
Welcome
but your
in,
body does
as
not.
in you.
Your body listens from the bottom up, from rhythm, from low frequencies, from the bass. The bass is what connects rhythm and harmony. It sits between the drums and the melody, and because of that, it controls how everything feels, not just how it sounds. Here is the key idea. The bass does not just follow the music. It defines the groove, where the bass hits, how long it holds, and when it leaves space. That is what creates movement. Imagine a simple drum beat, kick, snare,
Good to have you,
hi-hat.
BRD.
Now add a bass line that hits exactly with the kick. Everything feels tight, stable, grounded. Now shift the bass slightly off the kick. Suddenly, it feels looser, more relaxed, more human. This is called placement control. Tiny timing shifts, milliseconds, change the entire feel of a track. On the beat is controlled. Behind the beat is laid back. Ahead of the beat is urgent. Same notes, different feel. Take a simple chord progression. Play a bass note that matches the root. It sounds safe. Now change just one note. Play a different bass note under the same chord. Suddenly, the emotion shifts, tension appears. The bass controls emotional direction, not by being loud, but by guiding harmony. Underneath everything, it tells your brain, this feels stable, or this feels unresolved, or this is about to change. Groove isn't about how many notes you play, it's about where you leave space. Silence between bass notes creates rhythm. If you play constantly, you remove the groove. If you leave space, you create movement. Listen to a track where the bass drops out for a moment. Everything feels empty. Then it comes back, and suddenly, the entire song hits harder. That contrast is power. The absence makes the return stronger. When bass and drums lock together, something happens. Your brain syncs, your body responds. You stop analyzing, you start feeling. That's groove. The best producers understand this. You do not need more layers. You do not need more complexity. You need better placement, better timing, better interaction between elements. Because when the bass is right, everything else sounds better. So the next time you listen to music, do not just focus on what you hear. Pay attention to what you feel, because that feeling, that movement, that instinct to nod your head, that comes from the bass. It is not just supporting the track, it is controlling it. The groove starts at the bottom, and when the foundation is right, everything else falls into place.
Asia Hayden, welcome to the screen.
Gene, he says, nice one.
Good to see you here, Ratu.
The strongest part of a song isn't always the loudest moment. Sometimes it's the silence. Think about your favorite track. Right before the drop, everything stops. No drums, no bass, nothing, and somehow that moment feels massive. That's because silence isn't empty. In music, silence creates tension, and tension creates impact. Your brain constantly predicts what comes next. When sound suddenly disappears, that prediction breaks. Your brain locks in, waiting. You're listening to a build-up, energy rising, rhythm building. Then suddenly, everything cuts out. For a split second, time feels slower. Then, the beat hits again, and it feels stronger. Not because it's louder, but because silence made it heavier. This works because of contrast. Without silence, there's no
Welcome,
difference.
Parkalu.
Without
Graduate.
difference, there's no impact. Silence
Megani,
creates the
thanks for
contrast.
joining us.
Imagine a song that never stops, constant sound, no breaks, no space. It becomes flat, predictable, easy to ignore. But when you introduce space, you create movement, you create breathing room, you allow the listener to feel the rhythm
Hey there,
instead
Balpies
of
and
just
Yarn.
hearing it.
Welcome.
Great producers don't just add sounds, they remove them. They know when to stop the beat,
Welcome
when
in,
to pull back,
Hoanguin. Good
when to
to have
leave
you.
space. Because silence builds anticipation, and anticipation is what keeps people listening, waiting, locked in. So next time you hear a drop hit harder than expected, pay attention to what came before it, because it wasn't just the sound that made it powerful. It was the silence. The strongest part of a song isn't always the loudest moment. Sometimes it's the silence. Think about your favorite track. Right before the drop, everything stops. No drums, no bass, nothing.
Thanks for coming
Somehow,
in. Bye.
that moment feels massive. That's because silence isn't empty. In music, silence creates tension, and tension creates impact. Your brain constantly predicts what comes next. When sound suddenly disappears, that prediction breaks. Your brain locks in, waiting. You're listening to a build-up, energy rising, rhythm building. Then suddenly, everything cuts out. For a split second, time feels slower. Then, the beat hits again, and it feels stronger. Not because it's louder, but because silence made it heavier. This works because of contrast. Without silence, there's no difference. Without difference, there's no impact. Silence creates that contrast. Imagine a song that never stops. Constant sound, no breaks, no space. It becomes flat, predictable, easy to ignore. But when you introduce space, you create movement, you create breathing room, you allow the listener to feel the rhythm instead of just hearing it. Great producers don't just add sounds, they remove them. They know when to stop the beat, when to pull back, when to leave space. Because silence builds anticipation, and anticipation is what keeps people listening, waiting, locked in. So next time you hear a drop hit harder than expected, pay attention to what came before it, because it wasn't just the sound that made it powerful. It was the silence.
Songo, welcome. Make yourself at home.
The tragedy that changed the band forever.
Good to see you in the
Metallica
chat,
story.
Sandy Girl.
One moment changed everything, and the band was never the same again. Not because of music, because of tragedy. Before the global
Hey, my
fame,
love. Thanks
before
for
the
joining.
sold-out stadiums, before becoming one of the biggest bands in history, Metallica was still rising. Hungry, aggressive, relentless. They weren't just building a sound, they were building a legacy, and at the center of it all was a bassist who helped define their identity. Cliff Burton, not just a player, a musician, a thinker, a driving force behind their creativity. His influence shaped their sound, pushed boundaries, elevated the band beyond just heavy music. Everything was building, momentum was growing. They were on tour, traveling, moving fast. Then, everything stopped. A single moment, a bus accident, no warning, no time to react. And just like that, Cliff Burton was gone. The band didn't just lose a member, they lost a piece of their foundation. Shock turned into silence. Silence turned into questions. Could they continue? Should they continue? Because what they had built was built together. And now, that was gone. Fans felt it. The energy changed. The tone shifted. Everything after that moment carried something different, darker, heavier, not just in sound, but in emotion. The band moved forward. They had to, but the loss never disappeared, because some moments don't fade, they stay inside every decision, inside. Every song, every performance, and even today, that moment is still part of their story. Success doesn't protect you from loss. No matter how big you become, some things can still break everything. You don't control what happens, but you control what you do after it, and sometimes moving forward isn't strength, it's survival. They didn't choose what happened, but it changed everything they became.
The song that triggered a riot, Rage Against the Machine. They played one song, and the crowd lost control. Police moved in, barriers broke, people surged forward, and it all started with a guitar riff. In the early 90s, a band stepped onto the stage that didn't sound like anyone else. Rage Against the Machine. Heavy riffs, explosive energy, lyrics that didn't hold back. They weren't just playing music, they were attacking systems, and people felt it instantly. Every show got louder, more intense, more unpredictable. Crowds didn't just listen,
Thanks for tuning in.
They reacted, jumping, shouting, pushing forward, until one night it crossed the line. The band hit their biggest track. The opening riff dropped, and the crowd exploded. Not hype, chaos. People rushed the stage, security collapsed, barricades snapped, police were called in fast, but it didn't stop, because this wasn't just a concert anymore, it was a release. All the frustration, all the anger, all the pressure
Hey,
hit
Knock Van,
at
welcome.
once,
How are you?
and the music triggered it. Officers tried to push the crowd back, didn't work. The louder they got, the harder
Good to
the
have you
crowd
here,
pushed,
Cherry.
because the energy wasn't controlled anymore, it was raw, and once that happens, you don't manage it, you survive it.
Welcome in Q2.
The show ended early, people dragged out, sirens everywhere, and headlines the next day blamed the band.
Thanks for dropping by.
Said the music caused it, said the message was dangerous, but here's the truth. The energy was already there. The music didn't create it, it unlocked it. Shift. That's
Hey
what
there,
powerful
Caution.
music
Good
does.
to
It
see
doesn't
you.
tell people what to feel. It amplifies what's already inside them. And when thousands feel it at once, it becomes uncontrollable. Final line. It wasn't just a song.
Welcome,
It was a
Sultan
trigger.
Chiller Chop. Thanks for being here.
There was
Thanks
a
for
song
joining
that
us.
record
Fri
labels
10am.
didn't want released. They thought it was too raw, too aggressive, too different. But the moment it leaked, it spread faster than anything they had ever seen. It didn't start in a studio or with a polished release. It didn't even start with approval. It started in chaos. A band frustrated, overlooked, and underestimated was creating something no one fully understood. The sound didn't fit cleanly into a category. It wasn't just metal. It wasn't just rock. It wasn't just alternative. It was something else, something unpredictable, something that felt dangerous. Executives heard it and hesitated. This won't work. It's too different. No one will understand this. So they delayed it, held it back, tried to reshape it. But that's where everything changed. Because before it could be controlled, softened, or repackaged, it got out. A rough version, unfinished, unfiltered. And people heard it, at first slowly. A few listeners, a few fans, a few people sharing it quietly. But then something strange happened. They didn't just listen, they reacted, they replayed it. They showed their friends, they turned it up louder. Because it didn't sound like everything else. It didn't feel manufactured. It didn't feel safe. It felt real. And that's what made it spread. Radio stations started getting requests for a song that technically didn't exist yet. Clubs started playing unofficial versions. Fans started demanding something they weren't supposed to have. And suddenly, the people who said it wouldn't work lost control of the narrative. Because once the audience decides something matters, there's no stopping it. The label had a choice: ignore it and fall behind, or release it. They released it, and it exploded. Charged streams, live shows, crowds screaming every word
Good
to
to see
something
you,
that
EDY
almost
Adu.
never saw
Welcome.
the light of day. And the craziest part, nothing about it changed. The sound stayed raw, the energy stayed aggressive, the identity stayed intact. Because what made it powerful was the exact thing they tried to remove. Most people focus on speed, quick wins, immediate results. But the things that last are built slowly, carefully, with intention. Because anything rushed breaks. Anything built for attention fades. Anything built without depth collapses. But something built with precision, with patience, with purpose survives everything. If you want to build something that matters, stop thinking short term. Stop chasing visibility. Stop chasing quick results. Stop chasing recognition. Start focusing on precision, structure, longevity. Because the strongest things in history weren't built fast. They were built to last. And that's why they still exist while everything else disappeared. Anyone can build something quickly, but only a few build something that time can't destroy. They tried to control the sound, but the audience chose it first. And once it happens, nothing can stop it.
ZFRMBRND Aleclaire, thanks for coming in.
Hey JJ Asgar, welcome in. How's it going?
The album that was built on a man losing his mind. They didn't just make an album, they documented a mental collapse. And the most disturbing part? The person it was about was still alive when they released it. Before Pink Floyd became one of the biggest bands in the world, they were led by a different mind. A genius, a visionary, unpredictable, unstable. His name was Syd Barrett. In the beginning, he was Pink Floyd. He wrote the songs, created the sound, built the identity, but something started to change. Slowly at first, then all at once. He would forget songs mid-performance, stand on stage doing nothing. Sometimes he wouldn't play a single note, just stare. Other times, he would play something completely different from the rest of the band. It wasn't rebellion, it was deterioration. Behind the scenes, things were worse. Syd would show up to rehearsals and not recognize people. He'd disappear mentally, mid-conversation. No warning, no explanation, just gone. The band tried to
Welcome,
adapt,
Binyan.
tried to
Good
help,
to have you.
tried to hold it together, but eventually, they couldn't. One day as they were driving to a show, and someone asked a simple question. Should we pick Syd up?
Thanks for being here.
Silence.
Hello, Kitty.
Then someone answered, no.
Aldi
was it.
Langton.
No confrontation,
Welcome. Thanks
no
for
goodbye.
joining.
They just left him behind. Most bands would move on, rebuild,
Hey there, Doi
start
Sumem.
fresh.
Welcome to the
But
stream.
Pink Floyd did something different. They didn't leave the story behind. They turned it into something else. Years later, so they created one of the most famous albums of all time, The Dark Side of the Moon. On the surface, it's about life, time, pressure, money, madness. But underneath, it's about him, about watching someone fall apart, about
Welcome,
losing
John
control
Sunshine.
and not
Thanks
being
for
able to stop
tuning
it,
in.
about the fear that it could
Good
happen to
have
anyone.
You. Saya,
While they were
welcome.
recording, something happened
Saya
that almost
says.
no one believes at first. A man walked into the studio. No one recognized him. He stood there, watching, silent. The band felt uncomfortable, confused,
RATUGALAU.
until someone finally
Hey,
realized
welcome in.
it was Syd, but not the Syd they remembered. He had shaved his head,
Thanks for
eyebrows
joining,
gone,
comrade.
weight gained, his eyes empty. They had spent years writing music about his breakdown. And now, he was standing right in front of them. Some members cried, others didn't know what to say. Because how do you talk to someone who's already gone but still standing there? That moment changed everything, because it made the album real. Not a concept, not a story, a warning. The Dark Side of the Moon isn't just music, it's pressure. It's what happens when success, fame, expectation, and isolation collide inside one mind, and break it.
Hey Laura
That's
RG,
why it connects.
welcome. Make
Because
yourself
deep
at
down,
home.
everyone feels that pressure. Time slipping away, expectations building, control fading, the fear that one day you won't recognize yourself. They didn't just create an album. They captured something most people never see, the exact moment a mind begins to fracture. Some albums make history.
They built a movement and then destroyed it with one song. Not because it was bad, because it was too successful. Before the fame, before the money, before the world knew their name, Nirvana was just another underground band, raw, unfiltered, ignored by the mainstream. They weren't trying to be famous, they weren't trying to fit in, they didn't care about charts or radio, they just made noise.
Welcome, Mr.
And that's
Coco.
exactly why
Glad you
people
made it.
connected to them. Because it felt real, because it felt honest, because it felt
Fri 10am,
like something the
good to
industry
see you
couldn't
here.
control. Then everything changed.
Welcome
A
to the
single
stream.
track
Aor
dropped.
Panadar,
Loud,
say hi.
chaotic, different, but somehow
Hey Chocolate,
perfect.
thanks for dropping
Smells like teen spirit. It
in.
exploded.
Good to see you in the
Not
chat,
slowly,
King G.
not gradually, instantly. Radio stations couldn't stop playing it. MTV pushed it non-stop. Crowds
Thanks for
grew
joining
overnight.
alone.
And just like that, Nirvana wasn't underground anymore. They were the biggest band in the world, and that's when things started to break. Fans who once felt connected started turning. Sellouts. They've changed. They're not the same anymore. But the truth was, they hadn't changed. The world had. What started as rebellion became mainstream. What felt like escape became commercial. And the thing that made them powerful was now the thing destroying them. Even Kurt Cobain felt it. He hated the attention, hated the pressure. He hated what the music had become, because the same system they never trusted was now controlling everything around them. Crowds got bigger, but connection got weaker. The louder the world screamed their name, the more disconnected it felt. And that one song, the one that changed everything, became something deeper. Not just a hit, not just a moment, a turning point, the moment where success started to feel like a trap. Everyone wants to blow up until they realize what comes with it. Success doesn't just amplify your life, it amplifies
ACMR
your
Black.
problems, your
Welcome in.
pressure, your expectations, your identity, and if you're not ready for it, it doesn't build you, it breaks you. They didn't lose control because they failed. They lost it because they became
Good to
everything
see
they
you.
never wanted to be.
SEVDA.
Welcome to the stream, Sasha.
They blamed one man for corrupting an entire generation. But the truth, he didn't create the darkness, he exposed it. In the late 90s, one name started spreading fear everywhere. Marilyn Manson, not just as a musician, but as a symbol. To some, he was art. To others, he was a threat. His music wasn't normal. His image wasn't safe. Dark makeup, distorted visuals, lyrics that challenged everything people believed. Religion, authority, society itself. And that's exactly why he exploded in popularity. While other bands followed trends, he went the opposite direction. More extreme, more controversial, more unapologetic, and it worked. Massive crowds, sold-out shows, millions of fans. But the bigger he got, the more dangerous he became, in the eyes of the public. Then something happened that changed everything.
Diana,
A
glad you're
tragedy
here.
shook the world, and suddenly, people needed someone to blame. And his name
Thanks
was
for
at the
dropping
center
in,
of it.
friend.
Media headlines exploded. They said his music influenced violence. They said his image encouraged chaos. They said he was responsible. But here's what most people missed. There was no real proof, just fear. Interviews were cut, appearances cancelled, Public pressure grew fast. Politicians spoke against him. Parents protested. Entire groups demanded he be removed from society. And for a moment, it worked. His career took a hit. But instead of backing down,
Shed Power Fitness
he leaned
PT
into
says,
it.
Hi.
He didn't apologize, he didn't retreat. He did something smarter. He used the backlash as fuel. Every accusation became attention. Every protest became promotion. Every attempt to silence him made more people curious. And curiosity creates audience. Because controversy does something powerful. It forces people to choose. You either hate it or you want to understand it. Either way, you're paying attention, and attention is power. Slowly, his audience didn't disappear, it evolved. The people who stayed weren't casual fans, they were loyal. And loyalty is far more valuable than popularity. Most people try to avoid criticism. They play safe, stay quiet, follow the line. But the ones who break through, they trigger reactions, because reaction creates reach. They tried to blame him, silence him, remove him, but all they really did was make him bigger. If everyone is comfortable with
Hey
you,
Pac-Man,
you're not
grab a
pushing
seat.
far enough.
Welcome in, TBL
You can keep the same
Carbon.
drums, same melody, same tempo, and still completely change how a song feels.
Good to have you.
Just by changing the
AMI
bass.
Physics.
That is how powerful groove really is. Most people listen to
Mon
music from the top down.
PUTR.
Vocals,
Welcome. How's
melody,
it going?
hooks. But your body does not. Your body listens from the bottom up, from rhythm, from low frequencies, from the bass. The bass is what connects rhythm and harmony. It sits between the drums and the melody. And because of that,
Thanks for being
it controls
here.
how everything feels, not just how it sounds. Here is the key idea. The bass does not just follow the music. It defines the groove, where the bass hits, how long it holds, and when it leaves space. That is what creates
Welcome
movement.
to the stream.
Imagine a simple drum beat, kick, snare, hi-hat. Now add a bass line that hits exactly with the kick.
to see you
Everything
here.
feels tight,
Snow.
stable, grounded. Now shift the bass slightly off the kick. Suddenly, it feels looser, more relaxed, more human. This is called placement control. Tiny timing shifts, milliseconds. Change the entire feel of a track. On the beat is controlled. Behind the beat is laid back. Ahead of the beat is urgent. Same notes, different feel. Take a simple chord progression. Play a bass note that matches the root. It sounds safe. Now change just one note. Play a different bass note under the same chord. Suddenly, the emotion shifts, tension appears. The bass controls emotional direction, not by being loud, but by guiding harmony. Underneath everything, it tells your brain, this feels stable, or this feels unresolved, or this is about to change. Groove isn't about how many notes you play, it's about where you leave space. Silence between bass notes creates rhythm. If you play constantly, you remove the groove. If you leave space, you create movement. Listen to a track where the bass drops out for a moment. Everything feels empty. Then it comes back, and suddenly, the entire song hits harder. That contrast is power. The absence makes the return stronger. When bass and drums lock together, something happens. Your brain sinks, your body responds. You stop analyzing, you start feeling. That's groove. The best producers understand this. You do not need more layers. You do not need more complexity. You need better placement, better timing, better interaction between elements. Because when the bass is right, everything else sounds better. So the next time you listen to music, do not just focus on what you hear.
Welcome,
Pay
CR.
attention to what
Glad
you
made
feel.
it.
Because that feeling, that movement, that instinct to nod your head, that comes from the bass. It is not just supporting the track, it is controlling it. The groove starts at the bottom, and when the foundation is right, everything else falls into place.
Sonny, thanks for joining us.
So it was an issue of, the band that changed and lost their fans. They changed their sound, and their fans turned on them overnight. Not because the music was bad, because it wasn't what they expected. At one point, Linkin Park wasn't just popular, they were dominant. Their sound defined an entire generation. Heavy riffs, emotional lyrics, raw energy. Albums like Hybrid Theory and Meteora weren't just successful, they became identity. Fans didn't just listen to them, they connected to them, because it felt real. Pain, struggle, emotion. It wasn't just music, it was an outlet. Then everything shifted. Years later, the band released something different, softer, more electronic, less aggressive. A complete change in direction, and instantly the reaction exploded. This isn't Linkin Park. They sold out. Bring back the old sound. Fans who had supported them for years
Hey there,
started
SF.
turning
Welcome.
against them. Not quietly, loudly, publicly, because to them the band had changed. But here's what made it complicated. The band didn't see it that way. They weren't trying to abandon their sound. They were evolving, growing, trying something new. But fans didn't want evolution. They wanted familiarity. The same sound, the same feeling, the same identity. And when they didn't get it, they rejected it, even though the music was still successful. The divide never disappeared, because once expectations are set, changing them comes with a cost. And the bigger your audience, the bigger that reaction becomes. People don't just follow artists, they follow what those artists represent. Growth will always cost you something, because evolving means leaving part of your audience behind. But staying the same can hold you back just as much. They didn't lose fans because they failed. They lost them because they changed.
The day DC replaced their voice, they didn't just replace a band member, they replaced a legend. And fans weren't just shocked, they were furious. For decades, DC wasn't just a band. It was a machine, loud, relentless, unstoppable. And at the center of it all, a voice that couldn't be mistaken. Brian Johnson, gritty, raw, explosive. He wasn't just a frontman, he was the sound. From Back in Black to sold-out stadiums across the world, he helped build one of the most powerful legacies in rock history. Then everything stopped in 2016, mid-tour, mid-momentum, mid-dominance. A sudden announcement dropped. Brian Johnson was out, not by choice. Doctors warned him, continue performing, and he could lose his hearing permanently. Just like that, the voice of DC was silenced. Fans expected one thing, the tour would end, but it didn't. Instead, the band made a decision that split the entire rock world in half. They brought in a replacement, not just anyone, Axl Rose. Different band, different style, different energy, and instantly, the backlash exploded. This isn't DC, they've ruined it. This is a cover. Bend now. Fans who had followed them for decades turned overnight, because to them, it wasn't just about the music, it was about identity. DC wasn't supposed to change, it was supposed to stay the same forever. But reality doesn't work like that. The shows went on, crowds still filled stadiums, but something felt different. Not wrong, but not the same. And that's what made it controversial. Because the band didn't die, it evolved. And not everyone was ready for that. People don't just follow music. They attach to what it represents. The bigger your identity becomes, the harder it is to change it. Because the moment you evolve, you risk losing the
Welcome
people
back,
who
good to
built
have
you.
you.
But staying the same can destroy
Thanks for
you
coming
just
in.
as fast.
Invoker Ingopi.
They didn't betray their legacy. They chose to survive it.
Thanks for joining.
They were the biggest band in the world, and they destroyed themselves from the inside. Not because of failure, because of control. Before the chaos, before the headlines, before everything fell apart. Guns N' Roses was unstoppable, raw, dangerous, unpredictable. They weren't polished, they weren't safe, and that's exactly why they took over the world. Appetite for Destruction didn't just succeed, it dominated. Songs like Sweet Child of Mine and Welcome to the Jungle became anthems. And at the center of it all, a frontman who refused to be controlled. Axl Rose. Unpredictable, explosive, brilliant. But as the band grew bigger, so did the tension. Creative differences, clashing egos, different visions, and slowly, the cracks started to show. Shows were delayed. Tours became unstable. Band members started leaving, not all at once, but one by one, until eventually, the band that took over the world was no longer the same band. But here's where it gets controversial. Instead of rebuilding as a group, Axl took control, full control, legal control of the band name, creative control of the direction. And from that moment on, Guns N' Roses wasn't a band anymore. It became a project. Fans noticed immediately. This isn't the same. Where's the real band?